Okay guys, so we got another episode of Drone Lemonade, and the star of the show today is going to be the BabyHawk. I am going to do a complete overhaul of this, and I was really unhappy with the performance and the way it flew. And after some investigation, some comments from folks, and just in general figuring out what was wrong with this, I found out that the two major problems were the props being unbalanced and this frame just generating too much vibration that goes into the flight controller. So I think it was Frequent Flyer RC made a comment on my channel and suggested maybe switching the props around. I tried doing that. That didn't make any difference. I switched some of them around for the spare ones. That didn't make any difference. So these props are just going to be going away. I'm not going to be using them at all, and I'm going to actually take all the guts out, the motors, the ESCs, flight controller, camera, and out of this frame. And I'm going to put it into this frame here. This is the KT100 frame. It's a 2mm carbon frame. It can spin 2.5-inch props or 65mm props, and I'm going to use some gem fan props that will just press on to the motor shafts here. So if you take the props off, the motor shafts on here are about 1.5mm, I believe, and so you should be able to press on a 1.5mm prop that has a 1.5mm hole. I think Frequent Flyer RC has a video on this where he used some Gem Fan 2035 4-bladed props, a little bit smaller than these 2.3-inch props, and he was flying it around like this, I think without the prop guards on. That seemed to fly better, but I'm just gonna, if I'm gonna do an overhaul, I might as well just go all out and put a whole new frame on and just swap the whole thing out for some bigger props. I'm going to go bigger. I'm going to go with a 65mm prop. So I'm going to go ahead and I'll take this apart. I think basically you just take the screws off for the props, and then these screws here for the motors. You take off these screws here on the side. Well, let's see, over here. These two over here, and these two over here will release the camera pod. And then to take the frame apart, I think you lift up these little latches here and here, and then that will split the frame, or there's a bottom plate and a top part here, and that'll open it up. And then that should get all the guts out. But if I see anything unusual while I'm taking it apart, I'll come bring it back in the video, make a note of it. But I don't think taking this apart should be all that difficult. Okay, so I basically got the whole top part of this quad disassembled, took the camera off, the little camera pod with all those screws on the bottom. It's pretty easy to do. Now, getting these motors off is a little bit tricky because these are non-standard screws, a 1.3mm hex screw. Normally these are 1.5mm, so you need a special driver for that. So keep that in mind. You're going to have to get one of those to get these screws off. So basically you just got to get those off, and looks like it should just pop right out. The flight controller is already loose, and then I'm just going to stick it on the new frame. So everything comes popping right out of here except for this JST connector. It is caught here in the frame, so I'm going to have to desolder the JST connector and resolder it to get this off the frame. Okay, so here's a little of the prep work that I've done on the new frame. I put the standoffs on the outside holes here. This is for the section that goes with the top plate here for the camera, and not the mounting holes for the flight controller, because we're using the femto. We're not going to be using that. We're just going to be double side stick. Using some foam tape here for the mounting. And I just put some foam on the bottom of the frame here on some rubber bands for my battery holder. And for the flight controller, I got rid of the servo pins here, and I soldered on a little pigtail for my FlySky receiver, and I resoldered the JST connector, and I'm going to be using 3 layers of foam to mount the femto because it needs lots of vibration isolation, so hopefully that will solve a lot of the problems. Okay, so I ran into a little bit of an issue with mounting the motors. you first of all save these screws, because it's a special screw, and the standard screws for these 1100 series motors don't work. And apparently these screws are too long, so you either got to find some shorter screws or you got to put a little spacer in there. And you can see I have a little space in between the frame and the bottom of the motor. It's about 1 millimeter. You gotta do that, otherwise the screws will hit the windings and ruin the motor. And I'm using this little spacer here. It's like an M3 washer, 1 millimeter. I'm not exactly sure where I got this from. I think this is just a temporary measure. I think I probably will just get maybe like a TPU soft mount and stick that in there instead later. Because the C-clip is not rotating, although it's a nylon washer, so it doesn't really rub the motor that hard, so it'll probably be okay. But I think a TPU soft mount might be better in this case and maybe provide a little more clearance. Other than that, there's not a lot of space between the standoff and the ESC and the motor there, so maybe I'll probably have to tape this down and just mount the other two motors, and I think we're good to go. Okay guys, so here it is all fully assembled. I did one thing after I mounted the motors, and I discovered that the C-clips weren't spinning, and I didn't like that. So I scraped out the inside of the nylon washer. I just kind of drilled it out a little bit, and they all spin now, and so it's all fine. I'm using these GemFan 65 millimeter props, and they kind of really close to the standoffs here. I wouldn't recommend using these because you have to actually drill out the hole on these props. They're actually meant for 1 millimeter brushed motors, and I had to drill these out with a 1.4 millimeter drill bit to get them to press on. I would go with maybe like the Racer Star 2435 prop or the Rotorex 2535 prop instead, and you can just press those on. And if they're a little loose, use a little bit of dental floss. That's pretty much all you can do with these when you do a press-on fit. And it's because these proprietary motors do not let you screw on those props. You have to use a friction fit for those props. Getting the pod on top was pretty simple. I just went with the two standoffs and one carbon backplate. There's an extra carbon backplate and another one for the camera. It's these two that I'm not using these. Instead, I just mounted the camera with a little bit of sticky foam on this front standoff, and then put a little foam there between the back of the board and this back carbon plate here, so that the button wouldn't be pressing against that back button plate. And I just wrapped a rubber band around the lens, and actually holds it in pretty good, and it has a little bit of cushion, so it should dampen some vibration. That's about it. Didn't do a whole lot here. Just put my receiver in, zip tied my JST and my antenna back here, and she's pretty much ready to go fly. So yeah, I'll just go ahead and roll some flight footage now.